Hey, what's up everyone? I just wanted to do a video of my revamped G18C. It's by Tokyo Marui, the base model. The reason why I revamped it is because back last year, my stock hammer broke. As you can see, the head of the hammer, it just snapped right off at the neck over here. And if you look at where the cut is, or where it broke off, it's clearly pot metal. But this probably has survived thousands and thousands of rounds, and finally it had snapped. So I have used this as an opportunity to upgrade the hammer to something steel. Before, the rotor I was using is made by steel as well, and it worked really well. So I'm just gonna kind of go over about some of the parts that I used. So I'll start internally first. So during the past 2 weeks, I've actually upgraded the hammer and also the sear to steel parts, and it's made by UAC. The auto sear and also the valve knocker is made by AIP, and the rotor, it's steel. It's also made by AIP as well. This was a rotor that I was using originally with the stock TM G18C hammer, and it holds up pretty well. The only stock parts I've used here is the disconnector and the trigger bar. Now, if I look at the frame here, everything else I haven't really touched. I am using a SD recoil spring and rod. I'm using a PDI 6.01 inner barrel with an A+ hop-up rubber, stock BBU or blowback units, and everything else is stock. Looking externally at the gun, what I've recently changed is I've upgraded the sights to Guns Modify night sights. They're steel. They don't really glow as much. I just like the steel look. Fire selector I've also got as well. I think the brand is by Detonator. When I've installed this, I've actually modded the fire selector so that, number one, it clicks really well into the semi and the full auto spots over here, so it doesn't really wobble, and it clicks well and it's nice and firm in its place. So what I did is that I've put a spacer that is slightly below the spring that places tension on the nub that locks it into place with the slide. So as you can see, it clicks well, there's no wobble. If I push it down as well, there's also no wobble as well. So and then I'm just using a AABB Surefire X400 lights. The furniture, including the slide catch and the magazine catch, is made by Garter. I didn't really touch that, as well as the slide release lock. So when my hammer broke, I used that as an opportunity to kind of upgrade the internals. And before I did that, I really had to have a good understanding of how the gun works. So when the hammer is fully up, what happens is that as I cycle the slide, or if I charge the slide, the blowback unit, it pulls the hammer back so it locks with the regular sear. And then as you pull it back more, it locks with the auto sear. Now, as the gun returns back to battery, if I slowly return it manually, you will see that it doesn't fully reset into its original position, and it just, you can see how there's a bit of edge here and edge here. That's because it's the nub on the BBU that is actually rubbing onto the auto sear, and just a tiny bit of force like that would cause it to fully return to battery. So let me explain more clearly. On the blowback unit, the bump over here engages the rotor on the hammer, as well as over here. both parts help to cock the hammer towards the sear and the auto sear. The bump over here engages the auto sear. Okay, so there's a few interactions on the blowback unit. So as I rack the slide back, okay, so don't forget, hammer's being cocked first by the sear and then the full auto sear. As I return to battery, there's a small click to show that the nub on the BBU actually engages the auto sear. And what happens is that now the sear, the auto sear is not locked to the hammer, but now the hammer is locked to the regular sear. And this is where I fire. Now, if I don't fire, okay, now the slide is back to battery. The hammer is now cocked by the regular sear. I've noticed that as I rack the slide and return it back, a lot of the times there's a lot of friction because the ramp on the BBU was actually riding right along the rotor on the top surface. So if this is flat, it rides along here. And so what I needed to do is to make sure that the rotor here pivots just slightly so that the ramp on the BBU can actually catch on the edge and pull it back. So what I did is that I've modified the rotor right at the bottom. Okay, I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but it doesn't fully pivot as much on the hammer. I did that on purpose because if it can fully pivot, then the hammer would be flat. Oops, I'll show you guys again. But right now it's not flat, it's on a slight ramp so that it can grab hold of here. The other thing I forgot to mention is the UAC hammer and the sear. I had to do a bit of modifications, specifically on the hammer. What happened is that the hammer itself, the notch was too high, which means that it takes more force to pull back the hammer. So the hammer, it rotates around this axis over here, and it had to rotate a lot more. And near the end of the pull, it required a lot of force from the blowback unit. So what I did is that I slightly shaved off some of the edge where the hammer is engaged by the auto sear. So the hammer now, instead of having to pivot this much, it only pivots to this much now. So it's less, and it requires less force to pull it back. And I had to make sure that the hammer wasn't too high, that it was actually rubbing onto the blowback unit. Okay, so that's pretty much how I fixed my gun. So now when the gun cycles, it's very, very smooth. There's no resistance at all. It cycles very smoothly. And here's a test fire of the gun. So the gun on semi, and then on full auto. And there you have it. So those are some of the new changes I've made with my TM G18C. If you do have any questions or concerns or want to know how the gun actually operates, feel free to leave some comments below. I do know that the G18C is actually a bit more complicated than the G17s, where it doesn't have the full auto function. Okay, thank you for watching.